Welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Today we're going to prepare our beds for our fall root crops, and I'm going to go and show you what's in the soil, what we're going to do with the soil, and how to put the seeds in. So let's go. Okay, so for several years on these beds, I've practiced what's called no-till or low-till gardening. Technically it's low-till because every now and then you get in and you till some things up. And the reasoning is for no-till gardening is that you preserve the biology in the soil, the fungal life, the bacterial colonies, the fungal colonies, and you preserve all that stuff and you have good soil health. And because the life in the soil is there, the soil doesn't get as compacted. The roots that grow in the soil, when you come and take a crop out, you cut the crop down, but you leave the roots behind. The thinking there is those roots have already gone in and broken up the soil, and as they decompose, they leave spaces behind and organic material behind. And so you're basically letting the plants till the soil and put aeration and tilth in the soil. The problem is sometimes your soil does get compacted. And for root crops, I really need a fluffy soil, especially for carrots. And so I'm going to go ahead and till this by hand. I'm going to turn the soil up and fluff it up a bit and show you what's in that soil. Now that doesn't ruin your biology. Bacteria is incredible. I mean, they pop back real quick and recolonize your soil really fast. So, I'm not really worried about that. Now you can see that this soil, even over here where I've messed with it over here and kind of turned it up a little bit, but even here you can see it's pretty loose soil. This has been in here for quite a while with corn, tomatoes this year, and I haven't done anything to the soil since the spring when all we did was go in and loosen up the top. But even down in there, the roots have loosened it up and it's quite nice soil. Pretty rich, nice and black. You can see even some seeds from compost still in there. This is good rich soil, but we're still going to amend the soil with compost because root crops, well, they'll benefit from having that extra amendment. And so that's what I do every time I prepare the bed. I put about an inch of compost across the top of it and work it into the surface. But since I'm doing root crops here, I'm going to work down about 12 inches. At least 8 inches, maybe 12 inches, and I'm going to loosen it up so that the soil is just like this. Nice, loose, fine, aerated soil. Before I get there though, you can see I've got weeds every now and then, especially these morning glories these morning glory sprouts come up everywhere. So we'll go in here and get this soil nice and worked over today. Torched all the weeds. Now what all that does is kill the weeds on the surface, and it'll kill any seeds that are on the surface as well. But seeds that or weeds that have persistent roots and deep root systems, they'll just come right back up. So what I'm going to do is once I till my soil, I'm going to go ahead and torch the whole thing again just to kill anything I've brought up to the surface, and that'll help minimize weeds. Now we'll still get weeds, a lot of weeds in this bed, but the torch is a whole lot easier than going through and weeding all that stuff out by hand. So let's get to turning. Now you'll see that this grub hoe is about 8 inches long. And so as this grub hoe goes down, I'm really getting down about 6 inches worth of soil and turning that up. And that's really all I'm going to work. When I go and find some rougher areas or some areas that seem more compacted, I'll go down about 12 inches, maybe 10 inches. But it's sufficient for some of the roots I'm growing on this end, beets, radishes, maybe some half-long carrots, to go down just about as far as that grub hoe will go in there and turn up. And that's you can see that's some real loose soil. That's real nice stuff. I'm actually really surprised how loose the soil is. And I haven't tilled this soil in many years really deeply. I've only messed with the top several inches. But you see how that grub hoe goes in there And just the weight of the grub hoe goes in halfway, and it's just real easy to break this stuff up. So I'm real pleased with the way this garden soil has stayed real loose and real easy to work over the years. By just leaving the roots in the soil after I harvest each year. In fact, I didn't pull the corn up vigorously. I left a lot of the corn roots down in here too. So between this year's corn, beans, and tomatoes, this soil has remained very, very loose. Now you can see in some of the soil, I have lots of roots, and you see these little white things. This is perlite. Perlite comes from the potting soils that I've thrown in here, exhausted potting soil, which is basically just peat moss and perlite. All the nutrition's been zapped out of it, but I'll use that to fill in and recycle, put in my garden beds. After all, putting compost back in here too, so that just keeps me in some keeps me in soil. It's taken me less than 10 minutes to do an entire half of this 16-foot by 4-foot bed, and of course I already did 4 feet of it the other day, but you see how quickly it goes. I'll do that other half, and then I will torch the whole thing again. Then I'll come in with my rake and smooth everything out. Gets a little bit hard right about 10 inches, about my natural ground level down there, and I start getting into some clay. But even the clay is beginning to break up because of the years of organic material on top of it. Those organisms leaching down into that soil, and the worms working through it. Holy moly, it's fall, but it's still hot. We're gonna break into our compost pile for the first time this year. I'm gonna open it up, we're gonna turn out what's in there and take the coarse stuff off the top, and we're gonna harvest all the good compost down at the bottom for our fall garden. All this compost. You want some geckos? There's some geckos. If you followed my channel much, you've seen that we've been making this compost for a long time. And we've been piling it in here. It's got real hot. And you can see the different layers because I haven't really turned much of it. But from about here down, that's finished compost. From about here up, that's what we're going to rake off. But down here, I mean, that's a good amount of compost. So here's what we're left with. I'd say that's about, what, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 bags of compost if you buy them at the store. And I didn't do anything but throw stuff in here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our compost and screen it so that we get real fine compost, and all the unfinished chunks we'll put back in the pile. All right. So our plan did not work out of rendering this fine through the screener, through the sieve that we've built. And the problem is it's too wet. It has rained here for a long time. We had a tropical storm, we had floods, and so this is really gummy compost and it doesn't screen real well. So some of these big chunks that we find in here, we'll have to take them out by hand, but for the most part, you can see it just falls apart. And so as we work the soil and work it into our soil, we can take out any big chunks and any bits and pieces that shouldn't be in there, like this piece of plastic here and this piece of foil. We'll take those out as we go and work this compost into our bed. This is really good stuff. This is rich compost. This is the best compost I've ever made. Fantastic compost. now and then you gotta wonder how something got in the compost. Somebody was looking for that. What I'll do next is take a big rake, a light rake, a leaf rake, and I'll go over and just kind of smooth out the whole surface of the garden. If I see any huge chunks, I'll break them up again. But I'll show you a trick when it comes to planting fine seeds like carrot seeds or radish seeds, little small seeds, and you want them to be in there not real deep, but you got all this chunky soil. You put one down in there, it goes down in a crack. It's 1.5 inches deep. So I'll show you a trick that I've used in the past that works well for me, and it involves peat moss or seed starting mix or even fine potting soil. So what we have now is a very nice bed. You can see it's nice and loamy and loose. There's some chunks in there, but those chunks break up pretty easy, so any roots can get through the chunks because it's just compost. So I have no problem with root crops now. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to church tomorrow and let this sit through the whole day, let the sun bake this soil, and that will help make some of this, the top of this a little crusty. And I can come in and do another pass with my rake, and the crustiness ought to at least let it break up a little bit. So yeah, come back and plant. All right, so it's time to plant our seeds now, and I said I'd show you a trick that I use when I'm planting fine seeds or I need seeds to be surface sown. And it includes potting soil. So I have this potting mix, this seed starting potting mix. You can use very fine peat moss, or you can use very fine soil that you've sifted. Basically what I do is put my tiny seeds in there and just barely cover it over with that potting mix, and that gives it a nice fine mixture, especially when you're dealing with some soil that's not quite broken up as much as you'd like it to be. And that's how my soil is. It rained today, I couldn't break it up the way I wanted to, so I'm going to use this trick to put my root crops in. Now, carrot seeds are notoriously fine and slow to germinate, and sometimes hard to plant, and you want to get them distributed evenly, because when you come back and you thin them, you don't want a bunch of carrots clumped up. That's hard to do. So these are the kinds I'm going to plant, and I'm going to put them in these trenches, and I'm just going to sprinkle them in as evenly as I can, and then I'm going to come back over them with my fine potting mix, and I'm going to sprinkle and dust some of that into these trenches here. Carrots should be either surface sown or very finely sown. You can see how fine these seeds are. So let's get some carrot seeds in the ground. Now I'm going to have to come back and thin these for sure, because of the nature of carrots and their difficult germination. I'm putting probably more in here than I need to. I find it easier to come back and thin than not to. So that's enough of that one variety. Now I'm going to take some garden seed starting mix, and I'm just going to sprinkle it over my trenches, lightly covering those carrot seeds. And what this does, because it's fine, it's not like this rough earth of my garden bed with all these chunks in it. This lets the seeds come in contact with the soil. Now, you don't need a lot. All we're doing is providing some fine soil for the seeds to contact. Once you've got that in there, then all you need to do is come back over and gently cover your seed bed, very gently, with the finest stuff you can cover with. I'm trying to keep these big chunks out of my seed bed here as much as possible. So when I get a big chunk like that, I'll toss it to the side. I'll leave it in my garden, but I will just kind of let that stay in between the rows. All right, there's my first bunch of carrots. And what I'll do is gently tap it down. You can use a rake for this if you want. Firm it up a bit. Make sure those seeds get in good contact with that seed starting mix and the soil in there. And once that's firmed down, we'll come back and water it in really well. And you want to keep your seeds moist, not soaking wet. Just you want to keep this moist until they come up. Now, carrots take a while to come up, anywhere from 5 or 6 days all the way to several weeks. So we'll just keep an eye out on these carrots, and hopefully they'll come up sooner than later. Let's put some more in. Now I treat radishes the same way. You can plant radishes at basically any time of the year. So I've got these several different kinds of radishes that I'm going to grow this year. I've always wanted to grow this black one, and it is more of a wintry. It benefits from being in the ground when it's cold. So I'm going to plant this for my fall garden. I'm going to plant this Asian radish, this Red Beauty, and we're going to plant this Chinese red meat radish. And I've got some more radish seeds that I'm going to put in here as well, but I'm going to wait till these mature, grow up, and I pull them up, and we'll do some succession sowing, and we'll use the bed in different ways, interplanting radishes with other slower crops. We'll see how it goes. Let's put some of these in the ground. Now these are bigger seeds. When you look at a radish seed, you can actually space them out a little bit easier than you can with a carrot seed, because radish seeds are nice and round, little pellets, and when you pull them out, you can drop them in. They're small enough where you can drop them in space. I like to space my radishes about 3 inches apart, sometimes 4 if they're going to be a big variety. But again, you can come in and you can thin a radish as well. Always label so you know what you've got, because I'll forget. All right, well, we're done now. It's still warm. It's 88 degrees today. It's going to be 90 tomorrow, and we've got another week before we really get our first fall front, come about October 6th or 7th. So it's truly fall, and that's truly a fall garden over there. But we hope that the heat will help those germinate, and then as the cooler temperatures settle in, those will really grow and come up healthy and strong. I'll keep you updated. That's how we do our seed. That's how we sow our root crops. I also have some beets that I'm going to put in, and I'll put some beets in the middle of that bed, and I'm going to put some beets in my other beds as well. But my seeds are coming in quite nicely too that we started. Our cabbage seeds and our kale seeds, our cauliflower. So those will fill up the rest of our fall garden. And I'm looking really forward to having some root crops and some cabbages, some brassicas. So yeah, that's how we sow seeds. So thanks for joining us on Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Like us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.